Hello, my name is Troy Roach. I'm a citizen scientist studying low-dose nicotine patches for long COVID, ME/CFS, fibromyalgia, and many other chronic diseases. Today, I'm going to talk about the budget for this year's research into low-dose nicotine patches and how the money from crowdfunding will be spent. And you'll see that even tiny donations into this research will have a huge impact going forward. To put all of this into perspective, I thought it would be a good idea to look at what traditional pharmaceutical research costs. When you want to bring a new drug to market, pain meds, for example, can cost on average $1.3 to $2 billion to bring to market. Now, for a specific example, one drug recently approved for fibromyalgia by the FDA took 15 years to get to market. 15 years. And the last year, that company spent probably about $100 million. And what do patients get in return? They get a medication with only modest benefits for some patients that costs $22,000 a year. Okay. Now, I'm not saying all of this just to scare you, just to put things into perspective and why researching low-dose nicotine patches is very cost-effective. Before going forward, it's important to point out that developing a new drug and working with existing drugs that have decades of research is completely different. Nicotine has been around forever, and there are already decades of research behind it. Unfortunately, much of that research has been focused on cigarettes and the harms of smoking, not on nicotine and its benefits. So, to suss out the benefits of low-dose nicotine patches, I have prepared a budget of about $45,000. And with that budget, it will cover the costs of 1 year of research, including a longitudinal trial with 300 to 400 people. So now let's see where it's going. First, 20% will go to Renegade Research, which is a nonprofit, which is the backbone of a lot of patient-led research, not just the nicotine patch. The next expense is $24,000, which will be set aside to pay my salary as primary investigator in this research. Up until now, I've only done this as a hobby. Having a basic salary of $12 an hour will be enough to keep me going and be able to focus all of my energy onto low-dose nicotine patch research and helping others get better. Now, to break down the details, to give you a better idea of how the money is going to be spent, of the $45,000, we already have more than $6,000 as a grant from the Conroe Foundation. So thank you, Conroe Foundation, and thank you, Renegade Research, for helping get that grant for us. Next, let's talk about research costs. So in the most basic minimal plan of my research would be to do an N of 50 people longitudinal data that will be collected over a short period of time just to get a basic idea of whether the nicotine patches are effective or not. And if that longitudinal data matches the retrospective data that we already have published. So looking at this example, you can see here that the minimal cost per participant doing all the work myself would cost about $40 per participant. That's without adding in any type of measure. Now, with the Conroe grant, it looks like we would be able to add a few measures. For example, continuous glucose monitors, because many people report a reduction in glucose and insulin levels while on the nicotine patches. So it'd be interesting to see if that is universal or not. Next would be urine tests. Why would we be doing urine tests? Well, because it is the best way to see how much nicotine is actually getting into the system of people that are using the nicotine patches. There are huge variations into how transdermal nicotine actually gets into the system, depending on the pH of the skin, depending on the genetics, and how this is processed in the liver, etc. So the urine test would be very useful for helping to know exactly which dose is the best dose for each person, because it probably varies, but there might be a universal marker that could help us decide what the best dose is for each person. Next, another measure that I've added to the plan is grip strength. So with grip strength, the devices only cost about $25, and it's an easy way for people to test to see if their muscle strength is improving or not over time. I don't expect to see huge changes in this, but it is a cheap marker that we can include that doesn't require a large effort from the participants. So if we do just the basic for 50 people, then that will cost about $5,500. If we do just the basic, but for 300 people, that would cost about $15,000. Keeping the same measures of only 16 people doing each measure in order to get the statistical significance from those people. But this is not optimal. I would love to add some other biomarkers to the research. For example, I suspect that the amount of inflammation, cytokines, TNF alpha, IL-1, IL-6, etc., will be reduced while they're using the nicotine patches. And we can see if this change in inflammation correlates or not with people benefiting or not from the nicotine patch. Anybody who's not involved in research will be surprised at how expensive it can be. So I've put in some numbers of estimated costs to do the very basic parts of research in order to get it published in a peer-reviewed journal and make that published research open to the public. So, for example, IRB would cost at least $2,000. So that is the ethical review that you need to go through before getting published. Data analysis from an independent expert could cost up to $1,000. So the data we collect, we need somebody who is an expert in statistics. So we already have a deal in place with a fantastic mathematician who is going to help us with the statistics analysis of our data. Next, literature review. As I mentioned before, most of the research into nicotine is very twisted because it's focused on smoking. So we need to do an in-depth literature review in order to tease out the information we can get just about nicotine or nicotine patches and include that in our publication. And publication to publish is not free. If you want to publish, you want that article to be open access, it'll cost between $3,500 and $7,000 just to publish a paper. Okay. When I started doing research, I thought that people would be paying you to give you this research, but no, it's the other way around. You do all of the research, you do all the hard work, and then you pay to get it published and put it out there for the public and other researchers to have access to. It's a very strange system. So other expenses, for example, to have a website in order to centralize all the information we already have and make it easier for people to access that information. I would like to have a website, nothing fancy, just something that's functional. And also to do all these videos, I use a platform called Riverside, which helps with the editing of the videos, and that's not free as well. And in order to get the word out and to speak with other researchers and to have access to a lot of experts, it would be good to participate in some special conferences on these topics, and those conferences are not free. You need to pay for the registration, need to fly, have a hotel, etc. So that's also an additional expense. If we have enough money for that, then that would be great to add that as well. Another topic which is very important to a lot of people is that they want to know exactly what is in the nicotine patches they're using. We have seen clearly that there's difference in dosing. So dosing differs between different brands, but also people are worried about if there's contamination in the patches or not. So it would be great to find a lab that we could pay to analyze the different brands of patches that people are using and get some objective data to know the dosing and if they're contaminated or not. And last but not least, it's very important in order to review the existing research and write letters to the publications to ask for corrections when they confound smoking with low-dose nicotine. Unfortunately, this is a large problem. If we are able to fix some of the biggest mistakes in research and make sure that future publications don't make these same mistakes, and we can educate clinicians and researchers out there on the differences between low-dose nicotine patches and smoking or vaping or other forms of nicotine, then that would be hugely helpful to everybody involved, even patients with long COVID out there. And on top of this research, a major goal will be to educate people on the benefits and any possible risks of low-dose nicotine patches for these different chronic diseases. Many people are still confused about low-dose nicotine patches and think that it's a stimulant effect. Stimulant effect is the least important part of the benefits from low-dose nicotine. And lastly, most of the research on low-dose nicotine through patches is focused on smokers using it to quit smoking. But there's almost nothing out there on using it for other diseases. So we want to find out if there are any problems of using low-dose nicotine, short-term or long-term. So hopefully any of those problems will come out in the research, and that will help keep people safe going forward. Now, the main focus of our research is on low-dose nicotine patches for long COVID, ME/CFS, fibromyalgia, etc. But there are other people using low-dose nicotine patches for other things. For example, epilepsy, chronic pain, Parkinson's disease, dementia, and Alzheimer's disease, etc. Most of the research into nicotine patches for Parkinson's disease, for example, focuses on high doses and moving up to very high doses. But one of the Parkinson's patients in our Facebook group is reporting clinically relevant benefits from a very small dose. So that connects to our philosophy of this research is that you need to start at low doses and then the individual needs to titrate and find the best dose for them. Past research into Parkinson's and Alzheimer's disease, unfortunately, has been stuck at fixed doses. There's almost no wiggle room for the individuals to be able to titrate those doses and find what works best for them. So, apart from long COVID and ME/CFS, there are a lot of possible benefits to low-dose nicotine that may benefit a lot of other people out there, especially if it's looked at through the lens of which we are using it now. If you have any ideas for changes to the research, things that we can do with the funding, I am very much open to hearing your opinions. You can send me an email at TheNicotineTest@gmail.com. So, to finish off this video, I'm going to be sharing a few stories from people who have benefited from low-dose nicotine patches so you can hear from them. Remember, take care of yourself, and if you can, take care of somebody else too. See you in the next video.